we're back. Welcome back to another video, guys. So, like I said in my last group of videos that I made, I think I'm gonna start making it a point to make like more social based videos. Every time I submit videos, and I'll include one or at least one that has to do with, I guess, like social issues or things more not as business or tech based, but just more about social stuff that I've been seeing going around, and I just feel like putting my 2 cents in. Still want to make it, part of the theme of the channel, business, maybe tech related, but not it's not guaranteed. It depends on what I want to do with it. For this episode, I'm going to talk about the college trap. Yeah, I think this is something that a lot of people are kind of waking up to. And before I get into it, this is not a video telling you that college is worthless. It's more of we really need to reprioritize it instead of following the antiquated system that we've been following and has been pitched to us through media ever since we were children and stuff like that. I think we really need to reevaluate that. So that's what this is going to be about. Speaking for the millennial generation, we're well versed in the typical binary of going to college or the military. I think more times than not, for anyone who was hit with that type of conversation, me, or people who, if you hypothetically were, I think most people will opt to go to college instead of the military. And most of us go the college route, especially if you have relatives that have immigrated to this country 1-2 generations prior to you being here. In my case, my grandmother and my great aunts migrated here from Jamaica. So college was always a big deal to our family. It wasn't super strict or stressful the way I've heard many primarily African immigrants talk about it. But it's definitely that's something Caribbean folks and African folks have in common, is having that strict thing of, or you're going to college because education is super important. And depending on your family household, some want you to go to college because they're under the impression that once you go to college, you'll have a greater likelihood or be guaranteed success in general. But then you have that overlap of, no, you have to do something STEM related or lawyer or something like that. Yeah, it was still a big thing in our family. We kind of knew, my siblings and my younger cousins and I knew we were going to college, but our respective households, our respective parents weren't super strict on what we were going to college for. So when I went to college for business, it wasn't a thing. One of my cousins went in for, I believe it was video game design. That wasn't a thing. My little sister's starting over with culinary. That's fine. Everyone's able to do what they want. It wasn't super strict, but we knew college or some type of education had to be there. So let's go ahead and get into it as far as why I call this the college trap, and get into the specific reasons why I think we really need to reevaluate or reprioritize college, and the way we just throw kids into it with very little to any preparation, maybe even real thought behind it. So let's go ahead and get into some of the reasons I say college is a trap. Obviously, we're going to focus on the cons here. So honestly, these should be pretty common sense. The first one being high costs and debt. That's pretty common sense. College is getting even more expensive now than when I was in college, and even then it was still, in relation to previous generations, it was super expensive. The college I went to, the tuition was going up pretty much every year we were there. I went to a private institution, and love it. I'll rep it forever, but that was one of the many downsides to it. Was it was getting more and more expensive every year. And I'll even throw a little bonus reason on top of specifically that. Whether your family is, so to say, well off, or at the very least is upper middle class, maybe even middle class, and then of course if you are more lower middle class to just straight up lower class at all, that can create family issues. Because my moms and I used to butt heads a lot when it came to the financial part, talking to my dad about it. The financial part throws a lot of things out of whack, and it can create stress between families. I've heard of families, classmates and I guess you can say friends or acquaintances from back in the day, where even if it was temporary, some type of rift usually forms between the parents or the guardian, maybe multiple members of the family. God forbid there's a dynamic of you have like a favorite uh kid, like son or daughter, or a favorite niece and nephew or something that always got more attention historically. And when it came to their education, everyone showed up, everyone contributed, the money was never an issue. But then you have that with another relative where they're not getting that same support. Like you hear all of these stories going to college. Like a lot of people from all walks of life truly come to college, bro. That's one of the benefits of it. But speaking to the high cost of it, you know, you hear someone's a college dropout, you're thinking they're just lazy, they didn't know what they want to do, they probably gonna be a rapper, they're probably gonna try social media. And it's like, no, like some folks really run into financial roadblocks, and if they don't have the ability or the desire to finance their entire college education, then it's just better to leave. But then if you throw potential family based issues and rifts and stress that can come with that into the mix as well, forget about it. To a lot of people, that in itself just doesn't make it worth it, especially if you're coming from the whole immigrant background where your parents immigrated and now you're first generation American and you have to do this for them, you know, because that's what they came over here and worked for. Or you're me, who's second generation American, at least in relation to my dad's side, the Jamaican side, and it's still important, right? So either way, you got that. The next reason is the uncertain return on investment, which basically the whole thing is with college, you're supposed to get whatever degrees and then it's supposed to lead to jobs. And part of me wants to say, because there are other content creators, there's one in particular that comes to mind. Part of me wants to say this is heavily determined by the type of degrees you get. But as we're seeing, nobody is safe. Whatever degree you have, whether you have a degree at all, and even if you do, it could be STEM related. You could have been a computer engineering major, electrical engineering major. You could have went through an MBA program. You got an MBA. You know, it almost doesn't matter. We're seeing people get laid off left and right with credentials that would make you think like they should be so desirable anywhere in the market. And it's crazy that these people are getting dropped. We're seeing, you know, upper management executives getting dropped in from layoffs, or at least I have on LinkedIn over the last few years. You know, like nobody is safe. So yes, certain credentials may be more in demand, generally speaking, but it doesn't truly protect you from anything. Just because something is higher in demand, you also have to keep in mind that's like, it's relative. Because what's in demand now, just like with music, the sounds and things that we keep hearing that a lot of us can't stand because it sounds the same trap beat, 808s, crazy hi-hats, the same type of snares and same subject matter about substances, you know, sexual activity and stuff like that. It gets old. And then something new comes along, and now what used to be high in demand at one point won't be in demand anymore. Then as far as the job market, what makes it even more different, which I think this also applies to the music industry specifically, is the rise of AI being able to do certain things that humans were needed to do. And now humans are optional to a degree. Now with the music industry, that example might not stick because they tried that whole thing of signing an AI artist and it didn't work. Like there was so much backlash. I don't think it lasted even 24 hours. But when it comes to producing content, even when it comes to writing scripts, people use it for that. I believe people use it to make beats already. Like, you know, certain things are being removed off the chessboard. So the whole thing with that, and I'm going to emphasize more on this later, is it's not just a matter of what's university going to work. You have to pay attention to, you know, what's in demand at that moment. And then you have to stay on top of it to see what's going to be in demand down the line, either for yourself or preferably more so to this subject for your kids or grandkids who are supposed to benefit off of you making whatever moves you made to provide for them so that they can be better than you down the line. The next reason is limited practical skills. This is where the whole white collar and blue collar argument really comes into play. Blue collar focuses on traditional like hands-on skills. If you're a religious person, I'm not, but I do know that the Bible has a scripture in there saying learn to work with your hands so that you don't have to work for anyone else or be dependent upon anybody else. And the older I get, the more I find that may be like some great actual life advice, not just because the Bible said it, but like it's practical. Because you have even like this giant, I guess, potential wave or future wave of retirees when it comes to the blue collar industry. And it's getting to the point where it's on social media, where there was a video of a guy going with a different type of blue collar jobs that are going to be very empty and scrounging for talent, because a lot of people aren't being told like that's actually an option and they're lucrative. They may not be the safest, they're not gonna be super comfortable. And you might have to get comfortable with heights. You know what I'm saying? Like, depending on what you do, you might have to get uncomfortable with some things. But they're there. And a whole lot of these blue collar workers that are still in the field are older now. And a whole lot of them are about to retire all at one time. Whether you want to do it, for as a career, or whether you want to do it just to avoid the debt of college, and then maybe you can do college down the line. Either way, I think that's where the whole blue collar thing comes into play. But I'll talk more about that in a second. I'm not going to beat the heck out of that topic just yet. So that's the limited practical skills. And next is mental and emotional stress. College, to a lot of people, is always going to seem very, very easy. Again, this might be subjective to what you're going there to study, but when I tell you, man, there were people who they would get up 4 or 5 in the morning for something extracurricular, or depending on your point of view, it may not be extracurricular, because someone might have a basketball scholarship, a football scholarship, or a band scholarship, or something else that requires them to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, go to whatever practice sessions and stuff, or they just get proactive and, hit the gym, hit the weight room with the teammates, even if they ain't got to. Then they go to their regular classes. They probably work out 2-3 times throughout the day, between the classes and stuff. And then if they're choosing something medical related, like bio, something like that as a major, biology, or something like that, chemistry, more times than not, if not guaranteed, they have the regular classes, and then they have lab afterwards where they have to physically put, the stuff they're learning to the test. That might be a little bit different, because you're learning about different chemicals, substances, the human body, things like that, but you're also putting it to the test when it comes to how these things mingle with each other in and out of the human body, or just chemicals in themselves and stuff like that, right? That's practical. So that might be a little bit different, but in general, college is theoretical. It's all about what you know. The problem is, and what we find out is, what you know does not necessarily translate to what you can do. Again, I've mentioned this in a previous video that I recorded, I think, a couple days ago. If I decide to put it up, my mom was telling me about this, because again, my mom works in cyber. She's on the GRC side though. She's more on the compliance side of things. Even she said for her job, like, there are people getting paid and they don't know what the heck they're doing. Not only like in the job, but even during the interview phases, when she has to do a lot of interviews. These people don't be knowing what they're talking about. They still get the job and they be getting paid. College may be good when it comes to fulfilling certain requirements for customers, when it comes to what customers and clients that these big companies have. And they're like, well, we want someone with a bachelor's degree, we want someone with a master's degree, because those type of requirements when it comes to certifications as well as degrees and things tend to be, not always, they can be on the demand of the company themselves, but I would say a good amount of the time, they're also at the demand of the customer that you're going to be servicing. So that's where, even if you don't have a degree and you want to do a cybersecurity project and it's on the government side, it's very well known that if you want to work for a government entity on the cybersecurity path, you have to have like the CISSP, maybe depending on what it is, the CISA or CISA or CISM, the CISM, the Security Plus, all that stuff. Like, you need to have those because those allow you to be government compliant. And when you're government compliant, or DOD 8570 compliant, I think it is, that's what allows you to work on government projects, because that's what those people want. And it proves that when you have those certifications, that you know what you're doing, or at the very least you have the concept down and we can build on the technical skill. But when they bring people onto government projects that aren't even compliant with certain practices that those certifications cover, and something goes wrong, those entities or key people in those government entities can be the one to do like prison time and other stuff like that. So it's all meant to keep people safe to some degree. But the fact of the matter is, again, that brings a lot of stress onto, those of us practicing for it, whether it's business or other stuff. But then it's also, again, if you're doing something like bio, or if you have a band scholarship or some type of sports scholarship, and even if your major just ain't all that crazy, there are multiple elements that lead to people breaking down and being like, I'm gonna You know what I mean? Like, it's not pretty. They get into substances, they drink a lot, all that stuff, man. These are things we have to take into consideration long before we even hit the workforce. So a lot of people think mental and emotional stress is like made up. And it's like, no, like burnout, anxiety, depression, and result of that, like you're in such a safe space. And it's like, yeah, you're in a safe space from other people, but what some people may do to themselves, not even the self-harm situation, but again, like even when it comes to drinking and stuff, that's it's not always safe. So sometimes that's why people need to step away, take a gap year or something like that, and then they go back and finish, assuming they still have the desire and ability to do so. So those are some of the cons to college and the college experience that leads to a lot of people either dropping out, not going back, or leaving for a time and then going back, or even if they go all the way through with it in one go, many people tend to have a very rough time. So those are essentially the cons. Now, other things I want to talk about are things like other options that we lack awareness in. And I already talked about this first one, which is trade schools and vocational training. This is the opposite of college that focuses on theoretical training. Trade schools are hands-on. Now, they may not be the most fun things, they may not be the safest, they may not be the most glamorous, especially when it comes to the whole, for guys, if you work on trucks, if you work on cars, I forget what the job title is called, but the guys that work on putting elevators into buildings or help build buildings in the first place, right? HVAC, plumbing, electrical, which you're risking your life, all that stuff. Like, it's not sexy. It's not, I even see other guys do that line of work. I'm like, yeah, I personally wouldn't want to do it, but you can get into the workforce depending on what you're looking at within a year to 2 years. Usually the cost of it is a fraction of the cost of any undergrad school you can go to, generally speaking. And you can start off making decent money fairly well. When I was in Dallas, after my first job moved me down there, I ain't gonna say their name. And, that situation was done within a few months. It was like literally like the 90-day mark and all that stuff. The first job I had to take was at a 7-Eleven that I lived right across from in West Dallas on Sylvan Ave. Like, I want to say where Sylvan Ave and Fort Worth Ave, that 7-Eleven that's there, I was there. When I first got there, the place was being like renovated, kind of upgraded and stuff like that. They were making changes. And there's a dude that was on the second floor of the store painting one of the walls. I saw him there a few times during my first couple of days there. And I asked him, like, hey man, do painters make like good money? Of course, he's a Latin brother. And he was like, oh yeah, man, like painters, you just paint and you make good money and you don't even have to, mess your body up like carpenters or risking your life. Like, no, you just paint and you can still make good money. And if you go for like bigger organizations or even medium-sized organizations, you can make like 80 plus, good money, and you're just painting, And I stopped and thought for a second and be like, man, if I wasn't already living by myself and I just have to kind of take whatever job I can give myself at some point or get myself at this point, shoot, that's something I probably would have pursued. I would have dropped everything and pursued trade school to learn how to paint right then and there, But unfortunately, it wasn't the time. And the older I get, now that I'm actually, I'm scared to say settled, I won't jinx myself, but I'm kind of like settling into my career and I found something I like to do. It doesn't make sense for me to drop what I'm doing full time to go to trade school for painting, for carpentry, whatever it is. You can even go to trade school for like computer science type stuff these days. So even if you wanted to go into InfoSec long term, you can just go to trade school for basic, IT related stuff that is the equivalent of an associate's degree. You can probably start out as some type of technician with basic troubleshooting and stuff like that. And then you can pivot if you want to go into the military and get your benefits for college, or if you want to just go straight into college. Either way, you'll already have that experience. That also leads, and I won't keep going. We might as well piggyback and lead that into the next point, which is apprenticeships. So that leads to hands-on experience through job placement and apprenticeships. This is something my dad and I talked about a few days ago as well. And the experience of like a career fair in undergrad and the hiring process, at least for my dad's company, the company he works for, that like how they pick up mechanics for their trailers and stuff, is pretty much the same. Like, they go to the trade schools, They take a look at the students, they meet them, introduce themselves, interact with them, get an idea of their reputation from the teachers, take a look at their grades, their transcripts, and if they do well in the interview, they're hired. It's just a shorter timeline overall, and it's more practical. Then, let's say if you're a 20-year-old some dude that wants to go into trade school to learn how to do basic like auto mechanics type stuff. You do that, and let's say a company like the one my dad works for picks you up. So you work on their trailers, you do I forget what it's called, but like proactive maintenance and all that stuff. And let's say by the time you're 23 to 25, you could be making six figs as like, I don't know, an operations manager, some type of manager, easily out earning people like me who got a bachelor's, master's, maybe even more than that. We're making probably less than you have, or 20, 30,000 less than you have. Because you got that experience early, you know how to do stuff with your hands. By you having hands-on experience, literally, with like the hardware of certain things, whether it's cars, even when it comes to trade schools for computer systems, these days with cars, that's probably helpful with that. So you can probably go to the military or go straight into undergrad and pivot into engineering or something, work for Tesla, work for General Motors or something like that, and you'll be useful both on the automotive front as well as the actual computer engineering front. Like, who knows? Like, that could be a thing. I haven't heard of it, but that might actually be a good thing. The whole thing being like, it's more practical than college. Trade school, vocational training, apprenticeships are things that, at least for us, we were not taught about. It was mainly the whole thing of military or college. That was it. College just is not the end all be all. And part of me wants to blame the heck out of the old heads for this, but I think the old heads, obviously they were fed a certain narrative, and some went with it, some went against it, but there's a reason this was still the dominant narrative. I think a lot of people know better now, but it's kind of late for us. So I'm hoping that the next generation will know better, and if they want to go into the military, get benefits, then go to college, cool, because you eliminate debt that way. As a parent, I'm gonna be honest, if your finances allow it, I'm not judging, but if your finances allow it, and you're gonna be one of them strict parents that is like trying to push their kids to undergrad, they have no choice, they gotta go into STEM, this and that, at least you got 18 to 20 years before that happens. There's no reason you shouldn't be saving for well over a decade, for if not 2 decades at least. There's no reason. If it's cultural or something, there is no reason, if you have the funds to do it, and if you are not spending that entire time struggling, there is no reason why you shouldn't take any excess funds and put it away specifically for a college fund, especially if you are one of those parents that is going to be so controlling and so domineering, if that's the right word, dominating, whatever, that you're even going to try to steer or straight up tell your kid where they're going to go to college. Because at that point, it should be no mystery. I mean, I don't condone it, but at that point, there's no mystery into how much it should cost. And if you stay up with it over the years, you can adjust accordingly. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no reason. Another reason another lane that we weren't privy to is entrepreneurship and self-employment. And when I say this, I'm honestly not even talking about entrepreneurship in the traditional sense, like start your own clothing line, side hustle, this and that, and become a millionaire. I'm honestly talking on a smaller scale. So again, if you start off in trade school and you decide, okay, I've been doing auto mechanic stuff, the basic computer science, IT stuff, cybersecurity stuff, carpentry, painting. I've been doing this basic stuff for 5 years, right? And you're 25 years old. Now you're like, okay, I want to go into college, because that seems to be the main, if not only way I'm gonna be able to pivot from the blue collar side of things to the white collar side of things. It's not true, but I think generally speaking, it'll be an easier thing, or it just makes sense. So, or barbary too. You can go to trade school for barbary too. I talked to my dad about that, and he spoke about that. We spoke about that too. You can go to trade school for barbary stuff now. And you want to make that crossover. While you're an undergrad, instead of doing that stupid traditional thing of being an undergrad, especially if you're in grad school, but at some point you get your own apartment with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roommates, you all got to pay your own part. But the minute someone makes a bad decision or life happens to them and they can't cover their piece, everyone else wants to step in. The rest of y'all really ain't got the money like that. Y'all ain't got the funds like that. Everyone's struggling. Because now it's like, well, every time you get paid, you got to pay, especially these days, you got to pay for these overpriced, but, mid to low quality apartments with a handful of Negroes up in there, stuff like that. And it's like, if you were a barber, if you was already doing painting, if you was already doing carpentry, whether you're doing it under your name or you're able to do it part-time, like on the weekends for an actual company, you will be able to make, even if you only work a couple days or a few days a week, you'll be able to make so much more bread than the rest of us who did that stupid, typical retail thing, trying to make 11, 12, $13 an hour work, and you either didn't want to stay in the dorms or maybe for whatever reason you couldn't. So it just made more sense to get an apartment. But God forbid, anything I just listed happens, especially if it happens with roommates that you don't even know like that. You're like, you just need a roommate and you couldn't roommate with one of your homeboys or your homegirls. So, you took what you could get, you roommate with a stranger, and now that mofo screws you over somehow. And you be busting your butt. Like, I've noticed these lower level, like retail jobs and stuff, we be killing ourselves. But it seems like the higher up you go, there's less restrictions. People don't get drug tested like that. And the work seems to get less and less intensive, at least physically. The idea is that it gets mentally more intensive, but that's not even always the case. But you get paid. And again, you don't even have to be good at your job, it seems like, at least in some positions. So, it's all circumstantial. But again, my whole thing is, when I'm talking about entrepreneurship and self-employment, you can be a barber doing your own thing on campus. Be the go-to barber guy on campus. We had plenty of dudes like that at the college I went to. I'm sure that's still there. DJing for parties, we had that too. It became a whole thing of like, when the main campus DJ was graduating, they would pass it down, to the next guy, and rinse and repeat. But then again, if you have painting jobs you can do, if some of your classmates are locals and they need something done with their house, you could do it yourself. Get a few guys, especially if you go to college local to your hometown, your home area. You know what I'm saying? Play with it. You can work a fraction of the time compared to some of your peers and probably make still so much more bread than they would make, because you have an actual hands-on skill in trade to utilize and to leverage, versus the rest of us are doing the stupid retail thing that every old head feels like we have to do, So it's, in my opinion, it's something to consider. I think it's better, but at the very least, it's something to consider. The last thing I'll mention that we don't pay much attention to, and this is very new, and also mixed reviews on this, but online education and certifications. Not so much certifications as much as the degrees part. I got my master's online, and between the cost, the amount of time, and honestly, I think it was worth the investment. I went to WGU for my master's, and I know a lot of people, whether you're talking about InfoSec or just in general, there's not much credibility there. But for me, it's worked out fairly well. It was just a matter of making the best of my opportunities once certain opportunities came around. But once I got my master's in IT management, in my opinion, it was a big help and allowed me to actually transition over into IT. If I tried to transition over into IT without getting my master's, frankly, I don't think it would have happened. Personally, just off a business degree, I don't think so. My master's is a business degree, but it still requires like a certain level of technical know-how and understanding with networking and stuff. But also is a business degree geared towards IT. So it makes it known that I want to be in that space. Without it, I don't think I would be in this space now. I probably would have been out of the job market a lot longer than I have, because I don't know about y'all, my entire life, me and jobs do not mix. Like, I'm talking about getting jobs. Like, there are people who can get 2-3 jobs. Since I was in high school, there are folks that can get 2-3 jobs like it's nobody's business, and they always retain at a minimum of like 2 jobs, or they can always swing from job to job. They never get hit with the layoff, all that stuff. Me, I don't know. My experience has always been the opposite, and these days it's no different. The only difference is I no longer feel alone in it. It's everybody. So that's a little different. But the last thing, a few things I'll go over, and I'll make these quick because I just keep going on and on. Learn to adapt to the times. Again, a tradition can be good, but what makes tradition bad is when you just continuously over 1, 2, 3 generations of, you ain't gonna be a content creator, you're not gonna be a musician, you're gonna be a lawyer, an engineer, whatever, because you swear those are like the that's those positions are the epitome of society. They're guaranteed good money and all that stuff. It's not the case. Again, stay informed about the market trends. Just because something sounds good to be some type of surgeon or something does not mean it's automatically good. And even then, which I know, in the past, again, because technology was harder to do this, even like the argument of we need more black people as lawyers and things like that, which is true, but just the need is not easy. Like a good amount of people who become lawyers, doctors, and whatnot take on, if not the majority, take on insurmountable amounts of debt. It's just mind blowing, to the point where a good amount of black lawyers they will like understand. I won't say encourage, but they will understand you not going into law school, wherever the case is. Then you have the whole front, whether you're black, whether you're Latin, whether you are Indian American, wherever the case is, and you want to make change from inside the system, that whole thing. A lot of people would be like, yeah, that's much harder to do than you think. If that's one of your key motivations or your key motivation, you're going to have a very hard time. Either takes an extremely long time to make it happen, or it's so hard because certain people make an effort to block you out, right? So stay informed with the market trends. Don't always go purely what sounds good and what you think is supposed to guarantee money. Because again, as we're seeing, even with engineering, a lot of engineers and other folks are being dropped, as well as people in operations, the business side, marketing, whether you're technically inclined or not, people are getting dropped. And no matter how high up you are in the food chain, it seems like everyone's fair game at this point. Continuous learning and upskilling. This is hard. This, in my opinion, is a skill that not everyone has, but you need to be able to teach yourself how to do things. At least these days seems to come across as like a life skill. Like if you don't have the ability to teach yourself certain things or just concepts in general to any degree, it's probably going to be a bit harder, but it's possible. It's possible to learn yourself in your mind enough to figure out how you can learn things and how to simplify concepts enough so that you translate information in black and white on just boring piece of paper. You look at it and be like, okay, how can I make this make sense to myself? And the way I do it, obviously with my content, is I translate things to nerdy concepts. So I've made comparisons to Naruto, I've made comparisons to Yu-Gi-Oh, I've made comparisons to Anakin Skywalker, Star Wars. I make those comparisons because those are things I obviously understand. I grew up watching that stuff. So if I can draw those connections to those type of things, then it makes learning even like tech concepts that much easier for myself. The other one, the next step, be open to non-traditional career paths. This goes back to the white collar versus blue collar argument. Again, at one point, especially for us, if you know the basic history of the Grand Migration or the Great Migration, both phases of it from the early 1900s to the late 1900s, like trades was the name of the game, and people could have been poor but been able to take care of themselves, their families and things with no problem. And it's a mixed bag of reasons as to why that's no longer the case, but the fact that we somehow have turned around and have started looking down on blue collar work in general as like someone doesn't make a whole lot of money in this and that, that's a problem. And the fact that it's now making a comeback, and it's something a lot of people want to pivot into, even as a side skill, myself included, because we weren't even taught about it. It wasn't even brought up. It's not even like, it wasn't even an option when people did give you that ultimatum of, look, either you need to go into the military, go directly into a trade, go into college, or go into a trade first, then go into college, just work a few years, make some money, pocket that money. And then if you want to go into college, fine. Because with college comes with a heck of a lot of debt, which is something we don't even go in blind about, because not only does media talk about it, I don't know about y'all, but a lot of adults knew that growing up. They talked about it. So, it was one of those things where they're like, man, wait until you get to college or you get old enough, you're not going to have the time to do this and that, and you're going to have so much debt and da. So, if y'all knew this, then how did we completely skip over another path of opportunities that could have at least gotten us financially ahead, so that when it came time to, navigate those 3-4 college years, or, pay off debts after the fact, we would have had more tricks in our bags to pull from to stay afloat, So be open to non-traditional career paths, mainly when it comes to blue collar and white collar and stuff like that. I am not talking illegal activities. Last one, focus on personal fulfillment and passion. Now, while I am a big proponent of following your passions, I think the millennial generation is we are the poster children for this. I am personally not the type of person that will say, if you want to be a musician, you want to rap, you want to sing, whatever, screw college, screw your 9 to 5, go straight up after it, move to LA or Dallas or Atlanta or Jersey or New York, wherever it is, to pursue that career with no money in your pocket, whatever, and just make it happen. I am not that person. I am not someone that's going to tell you to do anything without much of a plan, especially if I'm not going to be there close by to have your back and to help you. And you're an actual friend of mine, right? I am now a proponent of do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do. And I know these days that it sucks to hear that, because again, job market is terrible. If you're able to, like me, while work can be work, hopefully if you explore some of these other steps, especially if you go to trade school first, or if you are just pushed by your family and chosen family when you're growing up to put your hands to things that you just enjoy. And it doesn't have to be a career, because trying to monetize every hobby you have can easily ruin your life. So money doesn't need to be the center point of everything. But if you're able to make a hobby, something art related, clothing related, whatever, that you can monetize for a short amount of time, keep yourself afloat until that corporate job that is in the same realm comes into play, or you can build your portfolio while you're working a corporate job that you don't necessarily care for, leads to a bigger opportunity down the line, then that's what make me say focus on that personal fulfillment and focus on your passions. Carve out room for it, but don't just wildly throw caution to the wind. That works for very few people compared to the masses. Carve out space for your passions, carve out space for your hobbies, and build that up over time, even if you do end up monetizing it short term. And if it's something you want to monetize long term, then fine, but stick to what allows you to make 70, 80, 90, even 100K a year, as long as it's not detrimental to your health. If you don't like it, we're kind of past the phase of that being a good enough reason. If it's actually detrimental to your health, then do what you need to do and drop that, that occupation, leave that space. Carve out time for your passions and your interests, develop them. And if you want to stay in that line of work, then, when the opportunity comes, you'll be ready. But until then, I think we need to kind of wake up. And I think most of us have woken up at this point. And we're like, hey, I gotta do whatever gets me some type of paycheck, preferably a decent one, still 70, 80K plus a year, because you can't scoff at that. An opportunity that allows me to do what I want to do comes around, I'm jumping on it quick. Learn to adapt to things, plan things out, look at the options that, to your knowledge, are maybe some people are turning their back on. We need to readjust the way we look at the college thing. Like, the last thing I'll say for sure, I'm not sure if I'm gonna talk about this again in a different video, but the very last thing I'll say, we need to stop the pipeline of going through grade school, K through 12, and then we instantly throw kids into undergrad right after the fact. Like, and I want to specifically talk about that mindset. So maybe that will be a different video for a different day. But I've gone on long enough, guys. Yeah, I'll stop nerding out now. If you have any feedback, comments, your own thoughts on the subject, suggestions for the future, go ahead and share that with me in the comment section below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.